Hey guys, what's going on? Thanks so much for stopping by. So today's video is going to be about a really common problem with 3.8 liter engines in the early JKs, and that is the upper oil pan gasket leaking. Went camping this weekend and noticed a small spot on the ground there. Really bothers me because I like to kind of leave everything how I left it, so we got to get that fixed. We can't let this leave oil all over the place. But in doing this, there's also something else I want to do. So I've watched a couple of these videos on YouTube with a couple different people having really good success with changing their gaskets. But there's one thing that none of them changed, and this is a very common problem in engines. So if you start getting leaks on seals, one of the first things that you should do is make sure your PCV system is healthy. Now this right here is a little $13 PCV valve. What it does is it allows the intake to pull vacuum on the bottom of the crankcase. Well, if this little valve right here gets stuck, eventually the bottom of your crankcase is going to go ahead and start building pressure, and it's going to start pushing oil out of those seals. With this happening all of a sudden, I'm going to go ahead and change this as well. This is also good insurance in knowing that when that gasket seats and it goes through its first heat cycle, that crankcase is going to be under vacuum instead of under pressure. So I know my gasket's going to seat right, and I don't have to worry about anything being blown out of place by a little bit of positive pressure in the crankcase. So anytime you are dealing with an oil leak on an engine, this can actually be the culprit, whether it be a valve cover gasket, a front engine seal, a rear engine seal. A lot of them have to do with the pressure in the crankcase. So this is very, very cheap insurance in making sure that the bottom end of your engine is healthy and not pressurized. Change this and you'll be all right. So we're gonna go ahead and get to this oil pan gasket now. There's not a whole lot of unique knowledge that I'm gonna give you that isn't in a couple other videos. This is a very simple thing to do. It's a simple install. First thing we gotta do is drain the oil and get the oil pan off there. So let's get to it. Go ahead and show you guys exactly what's going on, what this looks like. So you can see here the drips on the bell housing and down the block there. Now it's not too bad on the front. The front engine seal looks good, it's dry. But it's all the way down this side as well. Now a lot of people will probably think that this is going to be the rear main engine seal, but 9 times out of 10, I'm not saying that can't happen, but it's usually going to be this upper oil pan gasket. You can also look up the block here and just see the highest point that the oil comes from, and that's usually where the leak is. Sometimes wind can blow it up a little bit further, but not too much. So let's go ahead and work on getting this lower cover off, and then we'll pull this oil pan off. And we'll go ahead and take a look at everything. Okay guys, while I'm laying here draining the oil, I thought it was a great time to tell you the 5 things that you're going to need to grab from the auto parts store. The first one is the oil pan gasket. Second, you're going to need your oil and your filter. Third, you're going to need to grab the PCV valve. Fourth, we're going to need to make sure we got plenty of RTV sealant, so go ahead and grab a new tube. And fifth, if you do like I did, I ran Seafoam a couple days before this because I knew I was going to drain the entire crankcase out and do a full service anyway. Alright, so once you get the dust cover off for the transmission, the inspection plate off, you can go ahead and start pulling these 10mm bolts all the way around and go ahead and get the oil pan off of there. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Alright guys, as you can see, I went ahead and cleaned this entire mating surface to include scraping the old gasket silicone off there and there on all four corners. Now it's time to go ahead and take a look at the oil pan. Go ahead and clean up the flange on it, and we will go ahead and set the gasket up in here with the snap ends. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to be doing here is actually changing the PCV valve. We've got the bottom end buttoned up, so we're going to go ahead and pull this ignition box off here. You got a 10mm here and here. Alright, so pulling this down actually exposes where the PCV is. It's underneath this hose right here. So this is a spring clamp on there, so we're going to go ahead and get that spring clamp off and just pull this hose up and off to the side. So now we've got this PCV valve. This entire thing is slid down inside this plastic collar, so we got to get that up out of there. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and use a pick and pry up against this collar, and it should pop right up out of there. Oh, there it went. Just flew out and hit the ground, but all I used was a hose pick, put it in the hole, and just kind of wiggle it up out of there. All right, guys, so looking here at this PCV valve, you can see the problem that happens with these. You see this sludgy buildup right here, especially on the bottom and on the sides. Well, that's inside that valve as well, and that can contribute to deposits that stop this PCV valve from working. Even if you hear it rattle, that doesn't mean that it's not restricted to a point where it's less effective. So these are really cheap. Just go ahead and change them. A lot of people change these every few oil changes, but if you haven't and you get a bottom end engine leak or even a top end engine leak, it's always good to go ahead and change this PCV valve at the same time. Look at that sludge on there, it's terrible. The rest of the engine looked great. The underneath of the engine looked awesome, but just the oil vapor and how it cooks in these valves, junk. So now we're going to go ahead and put some oil on the outside of this rubber gasket and slide the new PCV valve back in there, put the PCV system back together. Then we're going to go ahead and change the filter and top this thing off. All right, guys, so that's another easy job done. Maintenance like this is really important. You get small breakdowns like this, it's good to go ahead and just fix them, get them out of the way. That way they don't lead to any bigger problems. If you really end up with a bigger leak out on the trail, that's a terrible thing to have to deal with. You just don't want to do it. So you get little things like this, even if you got to set other stuff aside to take care of it first, that's what you got to do. So that's done. Make sure if you guys end up with an engine leak, just change that PCV valve. I can't say it enough. That thing can cause you all kinds of problems, all the way from cars stalling and just not making enough power to oil leaks. So it's a very important part of your car. Make sure you change it when you do your services or if you get a leak or something like that. Thanks so much for stopping by. We will see you in the next one, guys. Take it easy.